Jim Comey might want to pull the plug on that book tour now that the former investigator himself is under investigation. Fox News has confirmed that the Justice Department's Inspector General is investigating Comey's handling of his memos describing his meetings with President Trump. A source saying that the DOJ's watchdog is looking into whether the former FBI director leaked any classified information. Let's get into the details with attorney Tom Dupree, who served as principal deputy assistant attorney general in the George W. Bush administration, plus Republican Ron DeSantis, who joins us from Florida tonight, and Stephen Mulroy, a former federal prosecutor. Gentlemen, it's great to see all of you. Stephen, let's start with you here. Jim Comey, as former FBI director, perhaps thought that, look, I'm the FBI director. I can declare what's classified and declare what's not classified. And so if I shoot these memos over to a pal of mine at Columbia Law School, no big deal. He'll get them to the press, and it'll cause a big stir, and maybe my reputation will be bolstered. Maybe he'll even start a special counsel. But, you know, doesn't this mean that, Comey could be in hot water now with this new investigation?
I'm not sure that's really the case, Laura. It's important to remember exactly what we know here. We won't know for sure until the Inspector General has concluded its investigation about what all the facts are for sure. But the Wall Street Journal has reported that there were only 2 memos that Comey gave to his friend that had any classified information. In one of them, he went through and redacted out the classified information, and the other one wasn't classified at the time. It was only classified later on. So it seems like his course of conduct here was fairly anodyne, fairly inoffensive. You can't very well blame him if the document wasn't classified until a later point in time. That kind of retroactive liability, I think he could argue, is unfair.
Well, Tom Dupree, is self-redaction legit here? He can then redact. It's like, look, I'm sending it to my pal who's going to get it to the press, but I'm going to get my big Sharpie. I have a Sharpie here. I'm going to get my big Sharpie and black out some foreign intel names.
Yeah, Laura, I think even Jim Comey's defenders would admit that he is walking a very fine line here. You know, if the difference between criminal jeopardy and innocence is where you draw the line with the Sharpie, I mean, my goodness, I wouldn't want to be in Jim Comey's shoes if the IG is digging into these memos line by line, trying to see whether or not he might have left something in that shouldn't have gone out the door.
Well, the Inspector General had no patience for Andrew McCabe, clearly. The lies from Andrew McCabe, I mean, he's in real trouble here, and we'll see if he actually has any criminal jeopardy there. But Congressman DeSantis, let's remember what Jim Comey said back in June of last year when he was testifying on Capitol Hill about why he decided to transmit those memos to his friend. And I think we have the SOT. Let's watch.
And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
For a variety of reasons, Congressman. For a variety of reasons, he also self-redacted at least one of the 2 memos.
Well, it's important to point out that that was malicious leaking of government documents. I asked Christopher Wray under oath, is it appropriate for FBI agents to leak their work product to the press? And he said absolutely not. I do think he's facing exposure because some of that stuff very well may have been classified. But at the end of the day, this is a guy who took those documents. He wanted to generate a special counsel. And it's interesting, you look at those memos, he actually writes down in the memos, I told the president I don't leak. The fact that he's writing that in the memo that he doesn't leak tells me he probably was a habitual leaker.
Actually, you bring up a great point, Congressman, and Steve, will go to you on this. This is from the Comey memo. This is from January 6th, right after his first meeting at Trump Tower with the president. He said, and he wrote, I said I was eager to find leakers and would like to nail one to the door as a message. That's very dramatic. I said something about it being difficult, and he replied that we need to create a narrative that we were investigating him, of course, because we are not, and I worried such a thing would be misconstrued. But he kept, as Ron said, as Congressman DeSantis said, he went out of his way a number of times to say to the president, he claims in this memo to the file, that, well, I'm not a leaker. You know, you can trust Andrew McCabe. He's a stand-up guy, and I don't leak, and McCabe is in your corner. Memos to the file are written by people to do what? Steve? To do what?
Well, I think probably to memorialize a conversation so that there can be no doubt later on, if it comes up, what exactly was said and what wasn't said. I think this course of conduct shows that Comey was a bit concerned about a potential obstruction of justice. He knew that there was a big controversy about it. He knew that it might become important later on to know exactly what was said and wasn't said. And so he wanted to contemporaneously document it so that there'd be no doubt.
On January 6th, he was worried about obstruction of justice?
Well, I think quite possibly. If you take a look at his whole course of conduct, I mean, he went out of his way to redact.
If you think he is obstructing justice, and you like sitting there and he's like, well, I'm looking forward to staying on with you, and I'm looking forward to, you know, he said, what are your plans? He's like, I enjoy my job. I'd like to stay on. So that's why Molly Hemingway today and others wrote that this whole thing smells like a big setup. The whole meeting, they're talking about the dossier to rattle Trump or try to rattle him with this, well, we don't know if it's true, but there's this thing, and it looks like they're saying this. Tom, your reaction?
Yeah, you know, it is puzzling. I mean, you know, the administration is just getting started, and already the FBI director is, you know, memorializing for whatever his purposes were.
Well, you don't memorialize to make yourself look bad. You memorialize yourself to make you look good in a meeting. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And look, this is exceedingly unusual. I mean, I can't imagine any other administration where a few days in you have someone feeling the need to create this sort of record. So there's unusual things going on here.
Congressman DeSantis, there's a Comey point in these memos that talked about CNN. I want to read it. He says, I said media like CNN had them, the memos, and were looking for a news hook. I said it was important that we not give them the excuse to write that the FBI has the material, or that's redacted, and that we were keeping it very close hold. He said he couldn't believe they hadn't gone with it, and I said it was inflammatory stuff, and they would get killed for reporting straight up from source reports. And then, bingo, just a few days later, Congressman DeSantis, CNN runs with it, then it gets published elsewhere. This is why people were saying, again, the way this is written, this memo to the file, I said CNN would be crazy to put. I don't know. If you're writing the novel here, yeah, and there's a CNN headline, Intel chiefs presented Trump with claims Russian efforts to compromise him. I mean,
well,
where did they get that from? Where did they get that headline from?
Well, just think about it. Jim Comey, this is a guy, he never memorialized any conversation with Barack Obama. He never did with Loretta Lynch, even though he now says Loretta Lynch was conflicted. It was only from day one with Donald Trump. So that meeting to me is very fishy because Jim Clapper, I and most of my Republican colleagues believe is the one that actually leaked the existence of the meeting to CNN. But why would Comey have...
Why do you think that?
Based off the Intelligence Committee, what they were able to come up with, and they allude to it in their report. But that's just the inference I make. I think he was the guy. Now, here's the deal. Comey acknowledges that it's not newsworthy at the time. They needed a hook. So what does he do? He gives them the hook. So either him and Clapper knew this together, or maybe he was acting at Clapper's suggestion. Yeah. But he provided the hook for that to go out. And when he's briefing Donald Trump on it, he only talks about the one salacious allegation. He didn't discuss other aspects of the dossier. Don't you think that's something the president-elect should have been entitled to know about? And yet Comey hid that from him. This thing smells very badly, and I think he's going to have to answer more questions about that.
He has to come back to Capitol Hill, does he not, Steve? I think the point that Congressman DeSantis is making is when you go out of your way to bring up the dossier, and you bring only basically one of the most inflammatory elements of the dossier up, that's rocket fuel to someone like Trump. Like, what? And, you know, you don't there's a lot of other stuff in the dossier. You bring up that one point. And we know now, in hindsight, that he was using that professor at Columbia to then get information out to the press. So he had it in his mind a couple months later to disseminate stuff to the press. He wanted to get out there. He wanted a special counsel appointed. So why wouldn't it be logical now to think, maybe he and Clapper chatted about this, said, you know, we got to get this out. Trump's rattled about this.
One person's setup artist is another person's, whistleblower. I mean, here's a lifelong Republican who was promoted by Republican presidents and whose handling of the Clinton email investigation, at least his public handling of it, arguably was very much to Clinton's detriment and Trump's benefit. So the idea that he's got a motive to I'm not sure that he has got the motive to do this setup job that we're speculating
about. Wait a second.
That's
Hillary Clinton got off scot-free in this email investigation. The Clinton Foundation investigation was totally scotched ultimately. So the idea that he helped Hillary, I never bought that argument. Hillary Clinton, if she were anyone else, would be in jail right now. She were anyone else would be in jail.
What I'm suggesting is that a prosecutor would just simply announce we're not bringing charges. He wouldn't go on to say, but she was extremely reckless. And then a week before the election, when he brought it back up again, well, I'm not sure. I think you can make an argument that that pattern of conduct doesn't show a pro-Clinton bias. If anything, it shows that he was not pro-Clinton.
All right, Tom, look, I see this as Comey has shown us that if he wants to get information to the press, he'll figure out a way to do it. Now, that was a couple months later. He hated Donald Trump. Today he said on an interview, or yesterday, oh, no, I don't hate him. I don't even dislike him. Oh, please. He walked into that Trump Tower meeting. Everything about Trump he despises. The way he dresses, the way he speaks. He probably doesn't think he's as educated as he is. He has utter disdain for Trump. He's a Bush Republican. I know you're a Bush Republican. He's a Bush Republican, but not like a lot of Bush Republicans I know. He's condescending, supercilious, and priggish, and he can't stand Trump because Trump's a different type of guy, and frankly, the kind of guy people vote for.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, one of the many tragedies, I think, here, Laura, is that historically, the reason why the FBI has been held in such esteem by the American public is they have widely been viewed as a nonpartisan, independent law enforcement agency. And what Jim Comey is doing now, I think, undercuts that. Because what it is it's portraying a former FBI director as a partisan actor, as someone who has a political axe to grind. He's going on the talk shows. He's taking personal jabs at the president. And it may be very satisfying to him and to people who don't like the president, but for purposes of the American people's perception of the FBI, I think it disserves the institution, frankly.